and welcome to Classical Stuff You Should Know. My name is AJ Hennenberg, and I'm joined by my colleagues
Graham Donaldson.
And Thomas Magby.
And we all work at Veritas Academy in Austin, Texas. It's a classical school, and we're here to talk about classical stuff. And today...
So yesterday we had a snow day in Texas, which is hilarious because a Texas snow day is like 50 degrees.
Yep.
And
it was a beautiful day yesterday.
It was a beautiful day yesterday.
It was sunny and balmy by noon.
But when the public
snow day.
when the public schools cancel or whatever decisions they make, we just follow suit. And so they canceled school because some parts of like San Antonio and more southern like Buda got hit pretty.
Yeah.
I mean, not
when they shut down
hard,
parts of Mopac were
it
shut
was
down
like
too.
an inch and a half, so hit hard means...
Yeah, but for Texas.
very.
Anyway, but this means that we had an entire day where we didn't have to do work. We could do leisure. And so, I know. And so we
you want to
had
talk about leisure today?
I think we should talk about leisure today. Thomas, can you tell us about
speak
leisure?
for yourself. I graded all day.
So this is probably a good place for us to start. So you all got an unexpected day off yesterday.
It's true.
Man, you could have used that day for anything. You could have gone rock climbing. You could have written...
It was snowy.
It was a snowpocalypse.
By noon, it was gone. So what did y'all do? What did y'all do with your day off yesterday?
Why don't you go first, Berg?
I sort of booped around the house until 11 a.m., which I am wont to do when I can sleep in, and then I graded a bunch. And then I went and had a... Does people really want to know my schedule for yesterday?
I think so.
No,
Yeah,
this
you
is
go
part
hour
of the
by hour,
conversation.
please. Yeah,
All right,
and
so
this will tie into our topic for the day also.
I went and met with a lady about DJing for a climbing competition, and then I went and watched Project Runway with Mr. Graham Donaldson.
Season 16. It's heating up.
I'm sorry, is it actually season 16?
Yeah, it's actually season 16.
Wow, that's terrifying.
And we've been faithful watchers since...
I think you and I have started watching it together season 11 or so.
Yeah, and I watched before that.
And then we've all watched it together. And then for me, I went to the gym and, read, but a little bit. I did do some homework, some grading, but knowing what you're talking about today, I'm full of shame that I did not do what Pieper commands us to do in our leisure.
Well, we'll come back to that. Like, what is Pieper actually talking about here? So when we're going to record this podcast, it was going to be right before Thanksgiving break, and so we could have planned our break time to follow with this goal of leisure, but I guess we'll just use this for Christmas time instead, which is just around the corner. So what I'll be talking about today is it's not really, it's an essay. An essay by Joseph Pieper called Leisure, the Basis of Culture. And perhaps more importantly, I should ask, is it leisure or leisure? What is the correct pronunciation?
It depends on if you're wearing any velvet. If
Well,
you're wearing velvet, it's leisure.
as you can see, head to toe velvet right now, so leisure is the way I should pronounce this.
I think you just follow your heart on this one, Thomas.
Please tell me that's the advice you give to our students also.
Should be in MLA format. I don't know. Just follow
your heart, man.
that little
Follow
heart
your
of
heart.
yours.
That's good. We'll be talking about leisure, the basis of culture. I guess what I have here, I have a summary of, there are these 5 different sections within the essay. But let's start out with, you all read this and did
Who is Joseph Pieper?
Joseph Pieper is a German Catholic. He was born in 1904. He was a professor of philosophy of religion at the University of Munster, where they also make the cheese. I don't know. That just made sense in my mind. So this book is from 1948. So that was after he had gotten to the University of Munster. And another work of Pieper's that is excellent is The Four Cardinal Virtues. And The Four Cardinal Virtues is a funny book because he actually wrote it in 4 parts. Like, he would write the part on prudence, and then a couple years later he wrote on justice, and then fortitude, and then temperance.
Well, it's hard to practice all 4 at the same time.
That's exactly. So he just kind of focused on one at a time and then kept going. It's a very good book also. My introduction to Joseph Pieper came through a book that is aptly named Joseph Pieper, an Anthology. Because it's an anthology of Joseph Pieper's works. So instead of it taking all of his works and combining it into one book, they take excerpts from each book. It's an easy way to kind of get used to the arguments of Joseph Pieper before diving into the full works themselves. But we'll be talking specifically about leisure today. We'll probably at some point come back to the idea of virtues, since we talked about vices not too long ago. But
So leisure, and the title is Leisure as the Basis of Culture?
Leisure, the Basis of Culture. So he gets to that point at the very end of this book, but just let's talk about. I want to hear about y'all's experience having read this book. Do you remember how you felt going through this book?
We can even start with like, do I remember something
Do you remember
from
the
this
book itself? Yeah, sure.
I remember it not feeling leisurely,
Yeah.
the read. It wasn't something I would choose to go back to if I had to choose. There are certain things that define my thinking that I always want to return to and reread. This was not one of them.
Yeah.
From what I remember from Pieper is he kind of was on the same camp as Aristotle, which is when you have all of your needs met, like food, shelter, those sorts of things. School is, or learning is what you do in your spare time. Like learning is rest, if I remember correctly. Skole, the Greek word skole, actually means rest, which our kids think is hilarious when you tell them that, because you're like, well, you know what school means? It means rest. And they're like, well, you should see my weekend. And so if I remember, he says that, like, yeah, that if you are actually at leisure, it's not that you're just sort of watching television,
right,
but you are actually improving your soul.
Yeah, that's good. So everything you just said, that's a great place to start with it. So in his introduction to the work, he talks about what Graham just said, that the word skole means leisure. And that's where we get our modern word school. So school was supposed to be, or was originally, this place of leisure. I subbed in a leadership class last year, and this is the thing I wanted to talk with them about, that the word for school comes from leisure, and I put that on the board, and just like Graham said, they laughed at me. Like, they thought I was telling a joke that those two things were supposed to be combined or related to one another. And I get that. I would not describe my school experience as leisurely. I don't know if you all would.
I kind of feel like my school experience was leisurely, but not in the way that Pieper is talking about. More in the way of not enough was asked of me, and I was not willing to go above and beyond what was just the minimal of what was just asked of me. And that's probably, Canadian public school.
Oh no, I shot for a 93. Like, I wanted to get right above the A-, but not work any harder than that.
Not have to work any harder. Yeah. So in that sense, like, when I think of school, when I think of high school, for me, it's just like a lot of like PlayStation and hanging out with friends, and I don't even remember the content of school. I don't actually remember like feeling like learning had any currency for me until university, and I was taking a class or two that just melted my brain, and then all of a sudden, like, this meant something. But definitely not in high school. So it was leisurely, but it was not leisure. It was.
But so that's interesting. So then, was university more leisurely, and we will define this term in a second, than you would say your high school, middle school, elementary experiences were?
Totally.
Yeah, I would say
that was where everything sort of opened up for me.
Yeah, I don't know. I sort of approached education the same all the way through, and part of it was just an I have to get this done attitude. And I don't know. I was not necessarily a proactive part of my own story in all of my schooling. I think I just sort of let school wash over me, and I enjoyed it was like being at the beach, right? I'm at the beach. Here come the waves.
Just go with it.
I'm just going to roll with it and learn. And I was really into school. I enjoyed learning. I enjoyed reading. I enjoyed math. I enjoyed science. I enjoyed all of it. But I don't think there was this realization in me that I need to focus on my education and learn as much as I can, because eventually it'll stop. It was just like, this is what people want me to do. I'm going to do it. Here come the things, and I'll learn what I have to learn.
Yeah.
So what is leisure, Thomas?
So before I jump into that one, so when you all read this a few years ago, you all had a conversation at Paideia, and there were, I think, 5 people on the stage. And something that was brought up a few times is that Pieper is not very clear in how he approaches this subject. And I didn't realize this until I wrote or took notes on each of the different sections. So that there's this one essay split into these 5 sections. He does not define leisure, which again is the title of this essay, until the 3rd section. So he spends 2 sections talking about this subject without actually saying what it is. And then he goes into that in the 3rd one. So we'll start there. We'll start with the 3rd and then kind of jump around from there. So Pieper's definition of leisure, he gets at a definition of it by its opposition to work. Leisure as this opposition to work. So whereas work is activity, leisure is non-activity. He has this quote in there about it where he says that leisure is about this inward calm, this silence, this acceptive attitude of mind.
So it sounds almost like the difference between, if you listen to a previous episode, Ratio and Intellectus, right? Where one is reason, the work of reason, and one is letting the object work upon you.
So the second section of this essay talks about, actually references Ratio and Intellectus. So this is kind of the sequel to that podcast, which I listened to again ahead of today's episode. And from that episode, there's kind of this question of what does this matter? Like, what is the implication of this distinction between ratio and intellectus? And I think leisure is the answer to that. Like, the reason there's a distinction between the two, the reason that distinction matters is that one is useful in leisure and one is the work that we're doing every other hour of the day. Ratio being what is typically valued of us, intellectus is what we receive and what we are receptive to.
Can you give me like an example? What would, if I was doing the same activity, let's say I was reading a book, what would the ratio, or what would the work of that, what would be doing that in a labor way, and what would be doing that in a leisure way?
I'm going to change your example.
I hear what you're saying.
I reject your
You asked
reality
the question
and
you want to
substitute
ask.
my
I'll
own.
answer the question I want to answer.
I'm going to address something else. A little bit of
You've
logical
been
fallacies were
watching
great.
the presidential debates.
Was
my
the
friend.
takeaway of the logical fallacies not use these logical fallacies? Wait, is that... Hold on. So you've talked about in class sometimes that you'll be teaching them about romantic poets.
Yeah.
And you're doing this work of going word by word and saying, this is what the meaning of this is. But students will have this moment, this aha moment, where
Yeah.
it's like they receive the meaning of it and
Yeah.
something happens to them. I think that's the easiest way to think about that distinction, is that one is... By diving into a complicated work and going word by word and trying to really understand the meaning, that's the... I looked up the pronunciation, so you can do ratio or ratio, so I apologize for listeners who are judging me right now. But that's the...
Don't apologize to the haters, Thomas.
Sorry, haters going to hate. That's the ratio work,
Yeah.
having to dive in and really work at it. But intellectus is that you sometimes just receive the meaning, that by having done all of this work, you get to the end and it suddenly makes sense.
So how can you, if we want both our students to be able to do both of those things, I feel like if I give them an assignment, or if I give them, let's say I give them the essay prompt, or the final thing that they're going to be producing at the end of the lesson, at the end of the 5 weeks of doing Romeo and Juliet, for example. I always have a rough time justifying giving them the prompt at the beginning, because I feel like then they're only going to read the book with eyes for how they do that,
Yes.
that assignment. And I feel like that is more of the labor or the work of English literature, which they need to do, and there needs to be some work. But how do you design a class or a course or a 5-week section of reading a book that actually creates that leisure where they're just receiving it and they're just enjoying it? Because something tells me that sometimes students don't just enjoy the homework, the reading that I give them to do at home.
What? What? I have two answers. One is that I think you'll answer this in the next podcast you're recording on the Trivium, in that there are different ways to approach that piece of... There are different ways to approach Romeo and Juliet. Mm-hmm. And it's not supposed to be blissful at every level of it.
Sure.
There is a work that's required to get to that point of being able to receive the knowledge, receive the intellectus. And
And there are books where that's even more evident.
Yes.
Moby Dick, for example, is not an easy read.
Do you watch Parks and Rec?
Yeah.
There's this part where Ron Swanson is like, I hate books with metaphors. My favorite book is Moby Dick. It's just about a whaling venture. And then at the end, someone says to him, it's about more than that. He goes, no, it's not. Thought that was really good because we read that last year.
Sorry, I derailed your thought
Sorry,
process.
Yeah. Can we get back instead of yes? What were you? Where
There's
were
a
you
second
headed
one, I
with
don't
all this?
remember it, but so let's go. So the ratio and intellectus is in his second book, or his second section of this essay, so we'll come back to that in a second.
Okay.
So I'll finish the definition of leisure. So first off, the way that Pieper is defining leisure. First is that leisure is non-activity. Second is that leisure is contemplative, as opposed to work, which is toil.
Wait, isn't that self-contradictory? Non-activity and contemplation.
Is contemplation an activity?
I would say it is.
So this is fun. So his way of clarifying what he means by... I'm sorry. There's a word I left off. Leisure is contemplative celebration. Sorry. Which you still may view as an activity.
So
You are in your
still an
in your
activity.
place, my friend.
Add a champagne, and you have yourself leisure.
So from that first point, we take that it's non-activity, which it is looking out and it is being receptive to what is outside of oneself. It is looking and saying creation is good. These things are good. The second part is celebrating what one is receiving. So man looks and affirms it is good, and he talks. His prototype of what this celebration looks like is the festival. The festival is the origin of leisure. So it's not just being receptive and receiving all this information, but it's taking joy in what you're seeing outside of yourself. So it's that celebration is the next level of that. I don't know if I would say that's an activity, though. You all might disagree with that. So if I'm sitting in this room and I'm taking in the greenness of that wall, and I'm just like, man, I love that greenness of the wall. Is that an activity that I've done by enjoying it?
You're not asleep.
Sure, I'll take that.
Wait, but as festival, so in that definition, so people would say it is more leisurely to be doing something like a big tailgate before a football game than something passive like watching a movie.
Yes. I don't know about the tailgate. I don't know if that would...
Well, I'm thinking like, what's a modern day
Between the
festival, right? Like, what is a modern day celebration of something where people are getting together and they're celebrating an event?
Pieper's final answer is, so in book 5 or in section 5, he says that Sabbath is the ultimate celebration, is the ultimate festival, in that it is a day that within the Christian community, you would culturally say no work is to be done on this day.
Yeah.
It's only for divine worship. And to engage in divine worship is you're doing something for its own sake, which is the worship of God. You're affirming all that God has made as good because it is a good God who has made it. And it's just this receptivity, it's this openness to whatever God would say in that divine worship. So his answer would not be, I took a religious studies class in when I was getting my MBA, and it was on religion and capitalism, and they talked about football as the modern American religion. So I guess there are some maybe comparisons to be made there, but Pieper as a Catholic ultimately takes this to Sabbath as the ultimate experience of leisure, which we should come back to in a second. Sorry, so the third element of leisure is that work has utility while leisure exists for its own sake. So there is no utility to leisure. For it to be leisure, it must be useless.
But if I enjoy, I don't know, say designing furniture, I have trouble seeing that as not leisure, right? It is an activity.
Yep.
It's something I enjoy, and it's definitely useful.
Yep.
But if that's something I enjoy doing, then what's the issue?
Yeah, his opposition is more to the social, like the external utility of a thing. So if you are you said furniture?
Yeah.
So if you're designing furniture to make money, then that has a utility to it. You're selling it to someone else. But if you're designing that furniture for the sake of furniture itself, like because you want to do that activity, that's different.
What if I do make money with it?
Then it's just a byproduct.
As long as that's not your reason for it.
So
He does not explicitly reference money in this.
So the point of leisure isn't the idea is not so much that it's a non-activity or contemplation, but that it's the celebration of the thing for its own sake.
You have brought all three definitions into one sentence by saying that. So these are three elements of it. It is receptivity, it is celebration, and it is for its own sake.
But if I'm not being receptive, I'm producing furniture.
You are just like the feeling of the wood and the tools and I don't know. Probably not. That probably wouldn't be receptive.
Yeah, it feels like we're sort of dancing around it.
Okay.
No, but I mean, there's something receptive of the craft, right? Of the enjoying of the experience, the aesthetic of the wood shop and the smell and the feel and that kind of thing. Like, for example, if there was a way to produce furniture with taking that away, you would feel like you have gone down a step as opposed to gone up a step to increase your productivity, right? Like if you're doing it just for labor, stripping it away of its aesthetic qualities would be seen as a good. You can churn these chairs out faster for more money. But if you're doing it from a place of leisure, then you've given up something. And that is the sort of enjoyment of the craft itself.
My point is that
it's still an activity.
Take away production from this and take away activity from this, and it is no longer leisure.
Well,
if I cannot act and create furniture, then my leisure goes away. If no furniture is ever created, then the leisure is at least hampered. Right? I make better example. I actually do make pottery. Like I do ceramics, and if I don't actually get a mug at the end of it, like it's kind of a bummer. And if I don't actually get to make something with my hands, then something is wrong. And I would consider that a leisure activity for me.
So when we talked about two thoughts. So when we talked about the not sins, vices, we call them vices. One of the vices we talked about was sloth or acedia, and one form of what acedia looks like is this. When we say sloth, we tend to think of like a lazy person, so like an external form of laziness. But the classical understanding of sloth is an internal disquiet, an internal not at peace. And so for activity versus non-activity, there's this, what Pieper describes it as is an inward calm. So if you can do your pottery with an inward calm, then that would qualify for leisure.
I think it's impossible to do it without that inward calm.
So unless I'm a corporation and I need to churn out 100 mugs by the end of the day. But for the craftsman
World's number one boss.
yay! So for the craftsman to do it, sure. Like I think that would be that could go with leisure. The other thing is that what people will point to as the ultimate form of leisure is philosophy. And that's
classic.
I know, of course.
Philosophers saying that philosophy is the ultimate form of leisure. Not color me not surprised.
He should be our leader, our king.
Our philosopher king.
Isn't it true that every philosopher says that philosophy is the end of man?
Well, and every potter.
But they're right, so.
No. It says
No,
that.
if everybody was a potter, that's bad. Then I can't make any money off it.
So this essay, Leisure, the Basis of Culture, is so the original version of this book was published, I think in 52 or 54, with an intro by T.S. Eliot, and it was just the book by itself. In 2009, it was republished, yes, with an introduction by James Shaw, who is also a great writer and speaker. I guess more writer now. But what it's paired with, its leisure is paired with the philosophical act. And what James Shaw is saying is that those two arguments must go together for there to be a complete argument here. So leisure sets up that we need something that is receptive and celebratory and exists for its own sake, and then Pieper's answer to what that is philosophy. So I think the questions we're having here is that in Pieper's framework, pottery is a lesser form of leisure than philosophy. And so that's why we have all these questions of like, does it qualify or not? Because philosophy is what qualifies ultimately.
Oh, this is kind of
Go for it.
I'm going to take a little issue with philosophy as the ultimate end of man in my next podcast.
Okay.
Which is great news. But philosophy is the ultimate end, the ultimate leisure. I can maybe see that that's okay, but I don't know. Some men definitely don't enjoy philosophy for its own sake, but would enjoy pottery for its own sake.
And I've been thinking about this in preparation for today because I think all of our episodes have eventually come back to this tripartite soul. That what does it mean of a person if they do not desire leisure? What does it mean of a person if they don't desire contemplation or celebration or non-activity? Would you look at that person and say, that's fine. They just have it. Is it a different preference or is it a moral matter to say, they work 7 days a week and they work 100 hours a week? Is that okay?
Well, it's not. You're not making a fair distinction. I was making a distinction between the potter and the philosopher, not between someone who has no leisure and someone who takes part in leisure. Right? If I can do pottery while celebrating the thing itself, while engaging in an inward calm, then I am engaging leisure just as the philosopher is. I don't want to think about the ultimate end of man. I want to think about what a great shape for a mug is. So what about a man who we'd say is perhaps unschooled and can't engage in philosophy in the same way that someone else does? Is he barred from leisure forever?
I would say no. I'm trying to find a good Pieper answer to this one. So this is the one part I thought we weren't going to talk about, but so 5 sections to this essay. This fourth one he calls an excursus. Have you ever heard that word before?
He's making that up.
It's a digression. It's like literally a digression is what he calls this fourth section. And he talks about, him writing in the 40s, he is thinking a lot about communism. And he talks about proletarianization. So it's people moving from owning a farm, owning a business, to being a wage worker at a corporation. That's what proletarianization means. But the problem he points to is not that people are moving from owning a business to being a wage worker. It's that they're moving from owning a business and having autonomy to being satisfied just in getting a wage. They're satisfied. They're one track. They don't care about any interior part of the person. And so is it a problem to make mugs? No. But I can also see someone that all they want to do is make mugs. And if they make money off of the mugs and they're doing it 7 days a week, like that's where you get into a problem.
Yeah.
Of there's only one dimension to the
But then
person.
they're not doing it for leisure. They're doing it because that's all they are. Yeah.
Yeah.
Does Pieper talk at all about the problem with like mechanization and industrialization? Like when the man has moved from crafting the entire piece of pottery and has to think about what makes, like, he's doing the whole process. Because AJ, just I come back to something you said earlier, that when you're making a mug, you're not necessarily engaging in philosophy, but you still have an idea of the good.
Yes.
What is, like, the good for this mug? What makes a good mug? And by extraction, like, the good mug is going to make the user of the mug's life better. Well, if you're making the user of the mug's life better, you have a concept of what is better for that user. And now we're already into sort of metaphysics.
Yep.
In a small way, but just in a small way, maybe you're not sitting there while you're making this mug actively thinking about the good of man, but you're coming to it with some sort of intentions of what the person is. So, Thomas, my question was, does he have this idea that autonomization or mechanization has removed the individual person from the process, and all they're doing is like sticking a handle on a mug on the conveyor belt and sticking a handle on the mug on the conveyor belt and getting money, and then they can go off? Is that the break between leisure and labor?
So this is what, when he's talking about the problem of proletarianization, which I hate that word, it's hard to say, is that what it does is that it makes people, like I said, satisfied in one track. He also says, he says what needs to happen is an enlarging of the scope of life beyond the confines of merely useful servile work, because proletarianization does the opposite of that. It focuses your scope on just adding this one widget, adding this one handle, doing this one thing. And so we don't need to change our job, but we need to think more broadly about what it is to be a man, not just in doing this servile work, not just in doing work that serves one function, but being... It is not... You're not fully a human if all you do is work.
Yeah.
And I guess that's what I'm getting at with this. And so, AJ, to your question, if that is done not as their form of work, can pottery be the means to leisure? Yes. People would say it is a lesser form, but it's still a form. And
so that was what I was taking issue with.
Not everyone should be a full-time philosopher. And people would not argue for that either.
But then he's condemning people to lesser forms of leisure. And that's
the classical idea.
That's what I take issue with, is that
different people, different preferences.
Philosophy is the highest form of leisure, and that anyone who does not prefer philosophy cannot engage in the highest form of leisure. That is what I'm taking issue with.
I think we're also confusing, like, when we, as modern people, hear philosophy, we think of a department in a university and people who are philosophers. Whereas I think classically, philosophy was, like, if you were making a mug and you ever had that thought of, what makes a good mug? And is this person who is using my mug happier because of the goodness of my mug? How can I improve their experience of this mug? Like, in that sense, you are entering into the philosophy of things. You're talking about the good, and you're sort of moving into metaphysics. So I think classically, they didn't have, like, philosophy as a subject or as a section. It was almost like a category of thinking about something. And so I think that's maybe what Pieper's getting at.
I'm with you there.
Okay.
But again, my poor potter, who has spent so many years doing pottery as his leisure, is condemned to mere moments of the highest form of leisure. Right? He does philosophy, and if that's true, if he only thinks of it for a couple of minutes, and then he goes back to making his pots and enjoying them, then he is only really engaged in the highest form of leisure for a couple of minutes out of those couple of years, which I take a lot of issue with.
So Pieper's argument would be that there should be 6 days of work which are non-leisure, and there should be 1 day of leisure. So that is a common experience available to the Christian.
Where you just look at that mug,
right? Or just take it all in, or like that's your day of experiencing that. So if we take Sabbath seriously, and we take seriously, to not work 1 day a week, we all have access to that same leisure. And if we take it the full Christian angle, which is where Pieper ends up, we have entered into rest through our salvation. The most important and necessary work for us to have accomplished has been accomplished for us in Christ. And so we can rest fully in that. So that same rest is available to all of us. It is not just certain people of means that don't have to work.
So it seems like we are now linking leisure instead of with philosophy with rest. And if I find pottery to be restful, then we can call that the highest form of leisure. My issue is with the definition and linking philosophy as with leisure in its own end. And I see linking philosophy with the highest end of man, right? The highest end of man is contemplation. And that's what I'll take issue with in my next podcast.
I'm so excited.
Yeah.
Oh, this is going to be so good.
I hope.
Okay.
But, hey, fingers crossed. That'll be a good podcast.
Yeah.
But my point is that to say that only those who engage in philosophy as their leisure are the ones engaging in the highest form of leisure, I think is wrong. I just think it's wrong.
Yeah. And that's fine. I mean, I don't think you have to agree with Pieper on this one. Maybe part of it, what I hear you saying is that Pieper comes at this because he is a philosopher, and so he defines...
That's what he enjoys.
Sure. That isn't the justification he gives, but I can see that because Aristotle does the same thing.
So does Plato. So do 1,000 other philosophers.
Sure. And I get that.
Wait, where are we going? I feel like I've derailed us. What was the overall point here? Can you give us like a umbrella view of what you're bringing?
I guess
to
the
us?
definition of leisure was the main point. Are we trying to land this plane right now?
I don't know.
The other idea that was interesting from it, that this should be a shorter conversation than what we just went through. So, like I said, section 3 is where he defines what leisure is. So again, this is probably the main point of what we're talking about here, is that Pieper is defining leisure as non-activity, as contemplative celebration, as existing for its own sake. The book before that, book 2 or section 2, he's talking about this idea of difficulty and value being tied together. And I think this is where I wanted to go, Graham, when you brought up the paper that your kids are working on. So there's this Pieper proposes that there's this idea that hard things are better than easy things. So things that we work for are more valuable than things that are given to us or just received. Is that something that lines up? Like, do you all agree with that idea?
Not necessarily. I definitely think that like we can feel that way and we get biases towards that. Like if you work really hard and make $10, you're going to value that $10 more than if you just sort of found $10 on the street.
Yeah.
I'm sure. I think there's an actual like sort of cognitive bias that is called, but I can't remember what it is. But I think generally it's true. Like that things that are worth doing are more difficult than things that are easier to do.
Yep. Or if you asked 100 people, if you defined for them what ratio and intellectus mean, and you said which one is like better, do you think people would have a preference for one? Like I think ratio would be the one that'd be like, yeah, it's the hard work. Like hard work will lead to more knowledge, more outcomes.
I think in our world, our modern world, people have, and I definitely see this in students, they have a predisposition to saying that working hard is the best thing to do. Like if you're a hard worker, that's like the greatest sort of praise that you can be given to somebody.
Yep. I think that's exactly right, and that's what Pieper gets at here. He says that Immanuel Kant is where that idea comes from, and I'm sure you all remember
good old hardworking Protestants.
Yeah, and so that and Max Weber. So then Max Weber comes in and says that the Protestant ethic is hard work.
Yeah.
So Weber comes many years after Kant, but that's the point that he comes to also. But this second section is all just to say that just because I think it's hard does not mean it is good, and that at the point where we are perfected in virtue, we will do good things easily, and that will be better for us than it being hard for us to do good things.
I was going to say, if we're talking about doing the good as hard work, it's hard work because of the fall. I don't think it's what we're supposed to. We're not doing good should not be the same hard work that we find it to be today.
Yes, yeah, and this is he gets to this in the Philosophical Act, but this is the distinction between Kant and Aquinas. That Kant says I think that's the right distinction, that Kant is talking about the fall as breaking everything, and that there's no hope for humankind, and it must be hard work for us to do good because there's no good in us. Mm-hmm. Well, Aquinas looks at the fall as more of a bend, and that there are problems in us, and our desires will lead us to the wrong place, but there are still good things in man, and that bend can be corrected in some ways. So through my sanctification, I should be able to forgive people more easily the longer I walk with Christ, so that it being easier is a sign of virtue, not a lack of virtue. Does that distinction am I being clear on that?
And that Kantian sort of definition of the fall of man being completely irrevocable predisposes the soul to acedia.
Yes. Because there's no hope.
Because there's no hope. Why should I work to improve myself morally? I'm a fallen person.
Yes.
And so I struggle with this.
Yeah. And then you stay in that struggle instead of doing anything about it.
And we all know that when someone says they're struggling with something, what they really mean is...
I'm doing it. I'm sinning.
I'm doing it, and I don't really want to not do it, but I also sort of recognize it's something I shouldn't be doing.
Or sometimes I try not to do it, but then I do it again.
But then deep down, I'm really not going to change.
Yeah. Well, maybe I think that's going to be the right place to land this. In that that wonder, what I think you were just talking about this, of that the answer to a lack of leisure And what Pieper means when he talks about philosophy is not metaphysics, it's not ethics, it's not ontology, it's not any of those things. It is wonder, and it is a celebration of all that is. And so whether you agree with these 3 rules that he lays out of non-activity, contemplative celebration, leisure existing for its own sake, we should feel the sense of wonder in creation, in books that we're reading, in ideas that we're going about with. And that is what Aquinas proposes as the solution to sloth or acedia, and it's what Pieper says we are lacking in our society today.
So how can I make, if we're going to go with this idea of 6 days of work and 1 day of leisure, how can I make 1/7 of my English class something that is wonderful, like something that is filled with wonder? Because like I said, as soon as I give my students an assignment, I can see their brains switch to, I need to sort of now follow this plan to produce this artifact to get this grade. And my feeling is that kills a little bit of it salts the earth for that leisure, that wonder. So how do you have like a 1/7 of a class or 1/7 of a school year dedicated to actual leisure?
Cancel all your grades and don't have regular classes and just do lectures.
No, you can't. But surely that's not the answer.
So
Well, there's a stream on the new campus. We'll be able to send the kids and be like, sit by the water and think.
and read it.
Just think and
Just
enjoy
think.
it.
Watch the fish.
There
No,
is,
but
have you
is
ever-
leisure trainable? Is leisure teachable?
Yes. I mean, yes. This is to a broader question that's been asked for thousands of years of is virtue trainable? And yes. My answer is yes.
Oh,
I'm not
okay,
very hard on
cool.
that one. So, but let's talk. So, I don't know if you all have ever listened to this delightful podcast from Cersei Institute called Close Reads. They're reading through.
But Cersei Institute is fantastic.
Yeah, they're reading through Twelfth Night right now, and I didn't think I liked Shakespeare very much, but hearing them talk about it's been delightful.
What?
Sorry,
You didn't think you liked Shakespeare?
Sorry.
Have you read a lot of Shakespeare?
clearly not, because I thought I'd read Twelfth Night and I could not remember a single plot point from that. So
Judgy,
sorry.
make a judge.
Well, I'm just
No, it's okay. I need
like
this.
you gotta.
I teach at a classical school. I did theater in high school. Like I should love Shakespeare more
There's
than I do.
there's a view of Shakespeare that he's hard to understand and really stodgy and his language is difficult, when really that guy was a verbal cowboy. He
Right.
made up half the words he used.
Right.
I read somewhere that he invented the prefix "un" to undo, to unhair someone's head. That was him. He just made stuff up. And half of our idioms come from him, like "dead as a doornail," Shakespeare. All the stuff we say. And so
he was writing for the common person. So like the people who would come to the Globe were like, they paid their 5 cents or whatever to get a front row seat. It wasn't just the high-minded people who were watching it. It was like common people. But I don't know.
Anyway,
Maybe I need more definitions.
Cersei
I need more,
As
I need more
a
definitions.
side note, so before we head to the Cersei Institute, one time I read an article written by a headmaster of a classical school,
Yeah.
and he says, our students have been reading Harry Potter, and we will not have them read Harry Potter in our school. Harry Potter's full of, witches and magic and sex and all these things. And he's like, they will read only Shakespeare. And I was like, I'm not sure this guy's ever read Shakespeare, because Shakespeare's bread and butter is witches and magic and sex and all that intrigue that comes with it. Oh, that was funny.
But this was a tangent on their podcast, so a tangent on our whatever. What they were talking about is that these people often get this question of what books should I teach? What books should I teach in 12th grade, 11th grade, 10th grade, 9th grade? And the problem they have in answering that question is that the books you teach should be the books that you love. Because if you don't love that book, you are not going to teach that well. You're not going to teach from a place of leisure, because you're going to be just trying to get through it as fast as you can because you want to get to Dante's Inferno.
deliverable. To the book you actually...
Yeah, to the one you enjoy.
Yeah.
So Graham, the way that you love Paradise Lost is the way to teach from leisure, because you love Paradise Lost. You are discovering it alongside those students.
But here's the thing. So I didn't love it my first year.
Good.
It's more like I faked it, right? Like I knew that there was things in here that were lovable, but I didn't enjoy it until I enjoyed it, right? Like I didn't love it until I treated it like it was something that was worth loving, and then before long I realized I loved it.
Yeah. And I think that's the importance of having classics and having a Western canon that we can say, bless you. These are books that people who are smarter than me have respected before I came on this earth, and they're at least worth a read.
Sure.
They're at least worth a consideration. So I think, you loving and enjoying that book is how you will convey to your students how to love and enjoy books. AJ, you've talked before about how one of your goals with the 9th grade class is to teach the love of literature, because they need to catch that now so they can succeed in Graham's class and then Catherine's class and then the senior class after that. Maybe do you have any deep insights into this question too of how you teach.
I agree.
Yep.
So AJ, wouldn't you say that like teaching them the love of literature is enjoying the thing itself? Like that's the leisure part
Yes.
of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It all comes back
It
together.
all comes back together.
Wow, well done. So I think that is going to wrap it up for today. So yeah, we talked about leisure today, talked about the 3 elements of it. I think of this podcast as leisurely. I just so much enjoy this. I'm just receptive to whatever weird things you all are going to say, and it is celebration to be here.
So podcast as the basis of culture.
That's exactly. Yep. Change the name.
All right. Well, that is our podcast here on Leisure. Dear listener, we thank you for listening to us wrestle with this idea, struggle with it even.
Oh gosh.
I'm just kidding. And if you have any questions, concerns, feedback, clarifications, please email us at classicalstuff@veritasacademy.net. And before we sign off, gentlemen, I am going to spring something on you. I'm introducing a new category to end the podcast called Classical Stuff Graham Got Wrong. So I was listening to an old podcast of ours on the Christian Knight, and I was talking about how chivalry, and how chivalry came from the French word cheveux, meaning horse. Cheveux does not mean horse.
Nope.
Cheveux means hair. Chevaux, however, means horse. So I spent 40 minutes, or however long it was, talking to you about a code of hair, which, I mean, I'm sure we could come up with a hair code. We have a dress code at Veritas, which involves hair.
There's hair, yeah.
So that's chivalry, I guess. Anyway, thank you for listening.
Hold on, that's not the only thing we've got wrong. I think was it the first episode we did the tripartite soul? That was Homer. Anyway, we
Second or
did the
third. It was
tripartite
early.
soul, and we kept on saying tripartite.
Yeah.
Like
the tide's rolling
like
in.
the
With a
tide's
T.
rolling in. It's with a T, tripartite. And I think there's a variety of other things we've sort of
Can I
screwed
get?
up.
So I confused justice and prudence on our last podcast.
Hey, man,
So
we
we're
got to
just all
save some of these. Like, this category needs to have, you
Yeah.
need to save your
Oh,
mistakes
yeah.
for
Oh,
future
sorry.
categories.
That's true.
awkward. There are plenty of other mistakes.
Plenty of
to talk
We'll
about.
comb our podcast for our mistakes.
Yeah, hey, we're all amateurs at this. That's
right.
We should also plug our website and iTunes thing. So we have a new website, and it's classicalstuff.net, and you can go and you can find all of our episodes there, and some nice paintings to go along with them. We also include some extra content, like on the logical fallacies. I've listed a bunch of the fallacies beneath the episode, so you can find those for reference. You can also find our podcast on iTunes. It's a way easier way to get our podcast, and you can find it through there. We're still trying to get on the Googles and the Spotify, but Spotify's method for getting it in is really you send them a letter and hope that they respond. Yeah, it's very strange.
Now we're not getting on.
Yeah. Well, they clearly haven't listened to us yet, so eventually
is gonna be the one?
Yeah, so
Oh, no.
Spotify, get on board, my dudes.
Please.
Yeah. So there you go. That's it for today, and this is Graham, Bees, and AJ signing off. So thank you, listener, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.
Doom, ba-doo, ba-doo, doo, doo, doo.
Bow, bow, ba-doo, ba-doo. Boom.